But I'm very excited to be here on my birthday and to share my presentation about the UC Davis Sheepmowers with you. Next slide. So just a little bit of background about sheep mowing. Basically what this is that I got excited a while ago when I found out that they were using sheep to mow some of the lawns underneath the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And I thought that that was about the coolest thing I had ever heard in my life. And then when I realized that UC Davis is an ag school and that we have our own sheep barn, I made it, my research agenda to get these sheep mowing our own lawns. So this is not without precedent. Sheep have been used to mow lawns as early as the 1850s when Frederick Law Olmsted, father of landscape architecture, designed Central Park. He extended it when he designed Prospect Park, and then also during the White House years in World War I, they were used as a way to show when the men were away at war that the sheep could do the job. And just a good quote from Olmsted that I really like, because it talks about the role of labor in art, which I think is really important, and the importance of maintenance and of highlighting it, not as something that you just forget about. Put in your garden and walk away, but really, like, how do you keep nature going? So really thinking about, this idea of so long as considerations of utility are neglected or overridden by considerations of ornament, there will not be true art. Next slide. So my research in general focuses on the idea on multifunctional landscapes, right? So I try and answer the question, how can science, design, and practice converge to inform the creation of accessible, multifunctional green spaces that maximize cultural and environmental values? And then, because I love coming up with little, fun mnemonics and things like that, I came up with this concept of nature heals, where HEALS stands for health, engagement, aesthetics, labor, and sustainability. So really, how do we take all of these different pieces that make a landscape and not just focus on one or another, but really how do we create those together? And then that led into, next slide, what if sustainability was instead sheep? And so I got really excited about this concept. And how can we bring sheep into the landscape and all of the amazing multifunctional things that sheep can bring in terms of, their operational benefits in mowing lawns, their educational and engaging in aspects, so cultural, but also environmental. Next slide. A lot of you know that I did work with Stacy at the Arboretum for a number of years, and we were an awesome team. And this concept of mowing lawns using sheep was one that I embraced for a while before I became a professor. And when I was at the Arboretum and said, oh, I really want to do this, people tapped me on the head and said, oh, that's so sweet. But then I became a fancy professor, and suddenly this was part of my research agenda. And so I was able to kind of push this forward. And then next slide, we have slowly been working our way on campus. So you can see our first year in spring of 2021, we were able to mow a small plot of land kind of on the outskirts, the very edge of campus. Technically still considered campus and, adjacent to the Arboretum. So that was good, but you really had to kind of go out of your way to find us. Next slide. Then last spring, we were in a much more central area. I had sort of proof of concept. And so we were able to move to a more central area and in front of the chemistry building and the physics building. And that caused a lot of excitement and stir. And then finally, my goal has been to get up to the quad where you see those double lawns up at the front. I've been told in no uncertain terms that will never happen. That there's too much sheep poop involved. But I'm working on it. So next slide, we are getting closer. So we just had a sheep showcase last Friday. We primarily have the sheep graze during the spring. In the fall, it's actually like lambing season and it makes it crazy, but we didn't want people to forget about the sheep and our program. So we had them out last Friday. Next slide. So basically, to give a sense of operational goals, I mean, just overview of the project, we bring out 25 sheep at a time for 3 days at a time. So essentially the sheep come out between 9 and 3 p.m. every day on like a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And they go home every night because there's all sorts of logistical issues. But we have a fenced off area, and we have snow fencing, and then we have another electric fence in there so that people really aren't around. And then the sheep are there. And so we're doing research on a number of different things, right? On the one hand, we're looking at operational goals, right? And so how well do the sheep manage weeds, maintain standard grass length? So we're actually like measuring those things. We're experimenting with low tech budget care, budget lawn care options. We're looking to see whether the sheep are fertilizing some of the soil. And is this a way to reduce traditional maintenance operations on campus? Next slide. And then we go into the ecological goals, where I get to put on my scientist cap. And, really, like as I said, talk about like soil nutrition, right? Are we adding better things? Are we creating healthier soil? And so we're taking measurements before the sheep and after the sheep. Are we improving like ecological biodiversity? Like, is the sheep poop actually bringing in beneficial insects? Are they helping to remove some of the invasive weeds? Like, we've seen them, eat other things sort of preferentially, things that we don't like to, we want to weed, but we don't enjoy doing it. So if we can have sheep doing it, that's better. And then can we also reduce levels of soil compaction, right? Because the sheep aren't as heavy as the lawnmowers. Next slide. But what I'm really interested in, and the part that I want to talk a little bit more about, are these social cultural goals, right? This is kind of the Nature RX aspect of it, right? Does having sheep on campus, on a college, land-grant university, actually help enhance place-based identity, right? Do students feel like they're really like a UC Davis ag when they see the sheep out there? Does it make them feel, is it something that they're proud of? Is it something that they're excited about? Does it then also create these opportunities for education and engagement? And I think it's really fun listening to all of these presentations and, talk about swag and talk about incentives and, creating succulent pots. We've come up with a whole series of different types of things that we do with the sheep, painting with the sheep, or, doing things like that I'll show you in a second. To try and bring students in, teach them about sort of the benefits of sheep, but to do it in an engaging way so that it doesn't feel like, something didactic that we're just telling them, oh, this is a good for you, this is sustainable, this is something that they maybe happen upon and they get really excited about. And then, does this help promote mental health, and does it reduce stress? Next slide. So in terms of, identity, like, we've really had a great time branding the UC Davis Sheepmowers. We have, we have our logo that a student created, and I have to, I've had the most amazing students work with me. And it's not just because I'm in an office right now and one of the students is right next to me and hearing this, but I've had amazing students work with me. And we've created sort of this identity of the UC Davis Sheepmowers. And we have an Instagram account that's there at the bottom, at UC Davis_Sheepmowers, where we've gone up to about 3,200 followers. We've got a website, and really sort of created this idea. The photo on the right, so we've tied bandanas on them. The photo on the right is actually showing them, they were invited to an outdoor gala that the College of Ag was throwing. So they got invited to come and participate in a gala. So we're really trying to integrate them into the community. Next slide. And then these are just some of the community events and some of the ways that we're bringing people in. I think by far our most popular event has been felting with the sheep, where we're using, wool felt and giving people little, balls of felt and needles, and then they can create their own sheep ornaments that they can hang or bring with them, and people love that. And then you can see one of the chair shares in the background. We've been lucky to be able to use those on the days that we have the sheep mower events. So we've got the chair shares, and we've got umbrellas, and we try and make it like a really just sort of peaceful, but also have an activity for people. We've done planting with the sheep, where we invited people to come and buy native plants from, this is like a taco truck, but it sells native plants. and we were actually giving out, what did we call it? Waste wool. And so it was basically wool from the sheep's bottom and stomach that we're using as fertilizer, so people could add it to their plants. And then we've been promoting grad photos with the sheep. So, again, sort of part of this place identity. You can come out and get your photos taken with the sheep. Next slide. We just did with the faculty and staff Nature RX, we made mobiles, get it? Because it's the sheep mowers. So we had make your own mobiles. We've done watercolors with the sheep. And so we provide watercolors and paper and, the muse is the sheep. And then sheep as motivational speakers, where I'm still learning how to do this, but we did use basically stencils, and we stenciled fun sort of motivational things during finals week that said, get your sheep together, work your grass off, wool the world. We love our puns within the Sheepmowers. And next slide. So essentially, this all went along with a mental health survey. And this is where we basically created a survey, and we asked people at the Sheepmowers event about, loneliness and happiness and well-being, and whether the sheep made a difference. And so essentially what we found is that when we asked people when the sheep were around, they definitely agreed, they felt a lot less lonely, it contributed to their well-being, all of this good stuff specific to the Sheepmowers. When we just did a comparison survey to when the sheep were around and then in the same place when the sheep were not around, we found that, stress levels were approximately the same, but what we're looking at is the idea of this momentary sort of sense of relaxation, right? That it's not like long-term affecting happiness, but in the moment, it's really contributing and sort of creating this sense of stress or stress reduction and relaxation. And then we've gotten tons of testimonials to sort of support that. Next slide. And then this is my new favorite thing. So I discovered this app that's like the things that you see at IKEA, where you get to press the smiley face to talk about customer service instead of like saying anything. And so we essentially just went up to people at the Sheepmowers events with a smartphone and said, how are you feeling right now? And they pressed the smiley face of how they felt. And then we had students go to the same place at the same time when the sheep weren't around and ask the same question. And what I think is so interesting is that if you look at just like the straight up happy face, it's really about the same. And so, great, everyone's got that same base level of happiness. But then when you look at when the sheep are present, that extra happy is so much more elevated than when you look at it with the non-sheep. And you can see with the non-sheep that you've got more non-smiley faces. So again, it's supporting this idea that in the moment, it is, this wonderful sort of happiness, like you feel really great about it. Next slide. So that's really all I have to say about the sheep, but it's been a really fun program. And I definitely say follow us on Instagram if you're at all interested in watching. We have lots of puns and we do lots of videos, and we're going to be out all spring. So essentially we come out and mow the lawns in the same place once every 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and it's 3 days at a time. So it's like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then 3 weeks, and then they come back. So thank you.